Good morning. I'm Anne Asis-Carilo, sitting in for Mikey Oreta, and you're watching Basis Points, where we dive deep into the numbers and stories that drive our economy and shape our world. The headlines: the national government's debt payments fall in September, driven down by lower amortization. Maynilad Water Services eyeing to push through with a highly anticipated stock market debut next year. Following reports of unauthorized transactions on the app, GCash assures its customers their accounts are secure. And Bitcoin hits a fresh all-time high following Donald Trump's U.S. election victory. First, a recap of how financial markets fared last week. On Wall Street, the S&P 500 closed with its biggest weekly percentage gain in a year. That's as Donald Trump's election victory fueled expectations for favorable business policies. Also supporting stocks was a widely expected 25 basis point rate cut by the Fed.
It can continue to go higher as long as we continue to keep inflation in check and the labor market stays relatively steady. In addition to that, the consumer is really important part of the equation. So as long as the consumer continues to consume, companies will continue to have good earnings. And that's so I think that the market can continue to rally for some time going forward.
It's different, though, in Europe, where markets fell as investors continue to assess Trump's victory and the political upheaval in Germany. Here in the Asia-Pacific, markets opened mixed after China's October inflation numbers came in lower than expected. Now here's a look at the week ahead for markets. Starting off with the Philippines' August foreign direct investment data, which will be released on Wednesday, November 13th. Net inflows grew 5.5% year-on-year in July. In the January to July period, FDIs increased 7.5% from the same period a year ago. Also on the 13th, U.S. time, the country will release its latest inflation data as markets wait to see if President-elect Donald Trump will push through with economic policies that could be inflationary. This Friday, we'll get to know the Philippines' cash remittances figures for September. The numbers grew 3.2% year-on-year in August, with the U.S. posting the highest share of overall remittances. Meanwhile, markets will continue to digest China's latest stimulus measures to support its battered economy, especially on the back of potential impact from another Trump-led trade war. And in Europe, the region's biggest economy in the spotlight, following the collapse of its ruling coalition. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's move to fire his finance minister points to a vote of confidence in January and possible snap polls in March. The national government's debt payments fall in September. They stood at 93.6 billion pesos, down 61% from the previous year. Amortization drove the decline, decreasing 88% to 19.76 billion pesos. Year to date, though, debt payments recorded a 17% increase, totaling 1.64 trillion pesos. Maynilad Water Services eyeing to push through with a highly anticipated stock market debut next year. The company says its initial public offering could be set for either April or July, with an estimated valuation exceeding $1 billion. While Maynilad's concession agreement requires it to list on or before January 2027, it says it aims to be, quote, push-button ready to submit its IPO application in early 2025. The company is mandated to list at least 30% of its outstanding capital stock within 5 years of securing its franchise. Ultra-billionario Ricky Razon all in on International Container Terminal Services, or ICTSI. The world's largest independent terminal operator gobbled up a total of 4.17 million shares at a price range of 369 to 400 pesos. The massive buyback increased the company's treasury shares by 37% to 15.5 million. ICTSI has been repurchasing shares since 2015 when they were trading below 80 pesos each. The company has surged 58% year to date, making it the best performer among stocks on the Philippine Stock Exchange Index. GCash assures its customers their accounts are safe. This comes after several netizens complained about losing money on the app over the weekend. The e-wallet provider says it encountered a technical issue during a system reconciliation process. It adds it has completed the necessary wallet adjustments to affected users. GCash also encourages its customers to report scams through their website, customer service chatbot Gigi, or their hotline at 2882. We're taking a quick break. Stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back to Basis Points. Philippine shares start the new trading week unchanged. Trading at the stock exchange opened just a few minutes ago, with the benchmark index slightly down 0.1% at 69 to 67. Meanwhile, at the foreign exchange market, the peso opened weaker against the US dollar. It opened at 58.45 compared to its previous close of 58.26. Now, to help us make sense of these numbers, we are now joined by the Managing Director of China Bank Capital Corporation, Juan Paulo Colet. Good morning, JP. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Anne. Thank you for having me here.
Appreciate you being here today. Now, JP, let's start with that. How are things looking for the PSE index this week?
I think the index will trade in a sideways pattern this week. We're looking at a range of between 6,800 and 7,100.
JP, lower interest rates, cooling inflation, steady growth. How are all these boosting investor confidence in the IPO market?
Well, these are all positive factors. In fact, we have been in discussions with potential issuers about reviving or pursuing their IPO plans. But everything is very fluid. Had you asked me in early October, I would have said that sentiment was very good. But right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. The PSEI is below 7,000, and foreign investors have become net sellers again. So it's quite understandable that a lot of our clients prefer a wait-and-see attitude.
Will the cooling inflation influence company valuations and the timing of IPOs?
The influence of inflation on IPO valuation and timing is somewhat indirect. It is relevant to the extent that it impacts monetary policy, consumption and investment, and thereby overall economic growth. And all those factors will be priced in by the stock market. But from our discussions with clients, they have been more focused on the state of the equity market. In particular, investor sentiment and fund flows. If sentiment is buoyant and flows are strong, then valuations tend to be more generous and risk appetite is healthier. And those are the conditions that you want for your IPO.
JP, let's talk about the macroeconomic environment. How do you see these enhancing the Philippines' attractiveness as a destination for both domestic and foreign investments?
And let me draw an analogy from art. So the economic and business landscape is like a canvas. And those conditions that you mentioned are the elements that form the painting. And what we see today is that those elements come together nicely in an economic picture that is attractive to many domestic and foreign investors. We have to keep in mind that the Philippines is one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. And so a lot of investors want to be part of that story, and they want to ride the potential economic upside. For example, looking at the year ahead, we are expecting the economy to grow by around 6.3%, driven primarily by a continued recovery in household consumption and private investment, as well as higher government spending. The elections will be a massive economic stimulus. And historically, it is usually the case that we see an uptick in GDP during a midterm election year. Now, that said, I know a lot of people out there are worried about the possible impact of Trump 2.0 on our economic outlook and financial markets. At this point, it's really hard to say what that impact will be because we do not have the exact details of his economic agenda. Sure, we are aware of his campaign promises, but promises are one thing, and actual policy and legislation are another thing. And I think these promises and expectations will inevitably hit the wall of reality, and the actual actions and outcomes will probably be more nuanced. So right now, what I can say is that the road ahead is more complex, but we remain confident that the Philippines is well positioned to maintain its positive economic trajectory.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
That's right.
Yes. Now, in terms of mergers and acquisitions, how do you see the lower borrowing costs and improved economic conditions impacting the M&A deals?
Those conditions are supportive of more M&A deals. First, deal financing will be cheaper. And second, better economic prospects can more easily justify deal making.
What are some of the strategic sectors where you expect to see the most M&A activity in the near future?
We expect M&A in various sectors, but in particular, we are looking at energy, infrastructure, consumer, retail, and healthcare. And we are also hopeful that we will see some deal making in the financial sector.
Now that you've mentioned infrastructure, let's talk about infrastructure projects. How is the lower interest rate environment affecting investments?
Lower interest rates are good for infrastructure financing. A way of thinking about it is lower interest rates can boost the viability of certain projects that would otherwise not make financial sense in a high interest rate environment.
Now, JP, the government has been continuing its push towards renewable energy. What opportunities are there for investment bankers in raising capital through green bonds and sustainable finance models?
There are many opportunities. In fact, we are seeing a lot of sustainable finance deals getting done, and there are still a lot in the pipeline. As investment bankers, we have been advising our clients on the available options out there, and we are helping them better understand the benefits and costs of doing these types of transactions.
Now, lastly, JP, before I let you go, how is the growing global focus on environmental, social, and governance investments driving the demand for financing in the renewable energy sector?
And it's good you asked that question because we have seen and we have been approached by a lot of local and even foreign funds who are seeking ESG investments in the country. And we think a lot of that liquidity will flow into renewable and clean energy projects. On our part, I'm happy to note that we have played a role in connecting many of these ESG investors to potential local partners, and we would be very happy to support their projects.
Thank you very much for your time, JP.
Thank you, Anne, and have a great week ahead.
You too. That was Juan Paulo Colet, Managing Director of China Bank Capital Corporation. We're taking a breather. Basis Points. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Inflation remains the top national concern of Filipinos, according to a survey by the Octa Research Group. The poll found 66% of respondents believe that inflation is the #1 issue that the Marcos administration should address immediately. This was followed by improving wages or workers' salaries. access to affordable food, and creating more jobs. Filipinos were least concerned about changing the constitution and reducing electricity charges. The survey was conducted from August 28th to September 2nd. Global food prices hit an 18-month high in October. According to the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, the food price index reached 127.4 last month, a 2% increase from September. The figure is 5.5% higher than a year ago, but it's 20.5% lower than the peak reached in March 2022, following Russia's invasion of agricultural powerhouse Ukraine. All major food commodities except meat saw price increases. Vegetable oils experienced the largest rise at 7.3% due to low production. China's consumer prices rise at the slowest pace in 4 months. The CPI increased 0.3% from a year earlier last month, slowing from September's rise of 0.4%. But core inflation, including or excluding volatile food and fuel prices, accelerated. Economists say the effect of stimulus policies to promote domestic demand in September is not obvious yet. New measures announced last Friday are also not expected to boost economic activity. Beijing approved a 10 trillion yuan package to ease the government's debt burdens rather than directly injecting money into the economy as investors had hoped. More Trump towers could rise in India. Real estate developer Kalpesh Mehta plans to build 6 new towers in various cities, including Mumbai. Mehta is the founder of Tribeca Developers, the Indian real estate partner of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Trade ties between New Delhi and Washington have grown steadily over the last decade. The U.S. is, in fact, India's top export destination, with goods and services exports reaching $130 billion last year. And before we go, Bitcoin continuing its post-election surge as it reaches a fresh all-time high. The world's largest cryptocurrency has hit $80,000, breaking its U.S. election night record of $75,000. That record topped a previous high of $73,800 back in March. During his first presidency, Donald Trump referred to cryptocurrencies as a scam, but he has since radically changed his position and even pledged to make America the cryptocurrency capital of the world. And that's it for Basis Points. I'm Anne Asis-Carilo, sitting in for Mikey Oreta. We'll be back tomorrow for more news on the financial markets and more. Keep it here on BNC, the Billionario News Channel, always on top.